usually morning people. You know, when they say, oh, it starts at 8 o'clock, my brain goes, as far as I'm concerned, 8 o'clock only comes around once a day and it's not in the morning. And thank you for that very long reading of my CV, Mayor Rhonda. No wonder I feel tired sometimes when I listen to all of that. It's a great honour to be here. I'd like to welcome dignitaries and VIPs, and I'd also like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting. The Gumbaynggirr people have occupied this land for thousands of years, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and thank them for their incredible culture and their way that they keep our land alive with this culture. Thanks so much for inviting me to Nambucca Heads today to spend this special day, which is known as Australia Day and also Survival Day. And regardless of our points of view about that, I personally hope that we can move forward and reconcile about this particular issue. But today, I invite you to make this a day of celebration, of joy and gratitude, of reflection about what it means to be an Australian, and to really rejoice in the fact that we live here in this incredible country. So welcome everyone. The theme for Australia Day 2019 is everyone, every story. I often say to my music students, to young people when they're playing, you must tell your story through the sound of the instrument. And there's only one person on the planet who can exactly recount the story that is yours, and that is you. We all have something to offer, and we all have something to say. I'm one of more than 300 Australia Day ambassadors adding our voices to today's celebration. I'm really proud to be part of this national program. I've been asked to be an ambassador for many years, but as John said, I've not been available until today. So in some ways, I'm an Australia Day ambassador virgin. I'm really proud to be part of the program. Right now, today, Australia Day ambassadors are participating in community celebrations all across the nation. I've got a paragraph here about why I'm an Australia Day ambassador, but I think Mayor Rhonda has pretty much covered that, so I don't have to go into too much about my background. I've released 23 solo albums. I've been described as Australia's first lady of the flute. You can say flutist, flautist, flautist, or safest flute player. I'm a professor, a composer, a TV presenter, and I'm sometimes, when I have the time, an activist. I've been campaigning against disposable plastics in the oceans for a number of years, and today, thank you. You might like to check out my YouTube playlist where I've interviewed a whole lot of famous and not so famous but entertaining Aussies about what it means to have our oceans, which are also the lungs of the planet, survive. My message is a no-brainer, which I've been touting for about 10 years now. If we could all just give up one piece of disposable plastic a day, it could make a difference of literally millions of pieces of plastic going into our environment. I think it's the place to start. Just one piece is so easy. Do you need that extra plastic coffee cup lid? You know, can you put a couple of cups in your car and rinse them out, or get the barista or whoever makes your coffee to just steam it out and clean it and reuse those cups? It's so important. Anyway, I'm not going to be too didactic today. I'll move on. I love working with young people, and I love to present my music to as many people as possible in as many varied venues as possible. I believe that creativity and to be creatively fulfilled is the birthright of every single person. And I think it's a path to happiness and a sense of freedom about who you are. I believe in equality for all. I also love to live in a world where no one is left out. I love to include everybody. To quote Bette Midler, I love people, they're my species. so proud to be an Aussie, and I'm also proud to have been recently knighted by France. And when I think about the legacy of what Australia represents to the world, all the fine things that we've contributed to the community of the world, I'm so proud. And when I think about the legacy of France, what she means in terms of freedom, democracy, arts and culture, creative expression, I couldn't be more honoured, really. When I went to France at the age of 18, I was offered a French government scholarship, and I studied with two of the great luminaries of the instrument, Jean-Pierre Rampal and Alain Marion. In France, we view the flute as a voice. I learned that the flute is the oldest instrument as an artifact which is known to man. The flute dates back 40,000 years, as does our Aboriginal didgeridoo. And these two instruments are thought by anthropologists that early man used these instruments as a tool of communication, as a form of language to communicate when perhaps spoken language was not very sophisticated. And so for me, whenever I pick up my flute, I hear the words of my French flute teachers: sing, chante, tell your story, make me cry with your stories. It can be tears of joy, but make me feel something. And they would say to me, you know, Jane, when you play, you must tell the story in the way that you must have la chair de poule, the goosebumps. If you don't have that, and if the audience doesn't feel this inspiration, it's okay, but it's not exactly music, you know. There's a big connection for me between the flute and the didge. I was so lucky. I was brought up in a culture of social inclusion. I had a fantastic education, largely public, except for about a year I spent at a private school. I went to the Conservatorium High School in Sydney, and I had brilliant teachers, people like wonderful Richard Gill. I never had a period in my life where there was not one inspirational teacher. And I really bless Australia for providing me with this incredible free public education. My mother is an Englishwoman who came to Australia shortly after World War II, in which she experienced the horrors of being bombed. She was a language teacher who taught many migrants English as a second language, and she would often bring her students home, and in the house in Sydney I often got to meet all these amazing people who were new Australians. Dad came from a working class family in the Bega Valley. Of Dutch origin, he became a successful businessman, an early computer programmer who spent time in the 1970s working for Aboriginal rights in the Northern Territory. He had an incredibly strong sense of equality between the sexes and gender and people of all races. And this, as did my mother, indicated their generosity. Dad loved life. My mother loves life. Dad loved to cook. He loved to share good fortune. If there was fruit on his fruit trees down in Sydney, he'd put them in bags, plastic bags, but nowadays I'd talk him into doing paper bags, I think. And he'd go around the neighbourhood and hand the fruit out. Mum and Dad were always the kinds of people, if they saw someone in the street, if they didn't know them, how's it going? How's your world? What's happening to you today? So I was brought up in this culture of being really inclusive, just in the way that we lived, as making friends all the time. If I came home from high school or primary school with a bunch of friends, Dad had his office at home, and he picked up an old waffle iron from an auction house. Mum thought it might electrocute him, so Dad would make homemade waffles for the kids, but he always put his big rubber gumboots on just to stop getting a shock. My grandfather had an amazing story. Ran away to sea from Fremantle at the age of 14 on a four-masted bark. He put his age up to enlist to go and fight at Gallipoli. He was in the Light Horse Brigade, injured in the Dardanelles campaign, was decorated in that war and then decorated again in the Second World War, where he was Lieutenant Commander in the Royal Naval Reserve. Now recently I was given an autobiographical novel that my grandfather wrote, which I haven't published yet, which is all about his life as a young man fighting at Gallipoli. Both my parents spent their lives sharing their love of knowledge. They encouraged me in every endeavour, and they instilled a strong sense of belief in myself. And they also showed me how to love and care for the bush and how to be in nature. They were entirely lacking in prejudice. You know, a couple of days ago, Hugh Mackey gave a brilliant Australia Day address where his theme was inviting us all for the Australia of the future to be one of compassion and kindness, and this really resonates in my heart. It's the kind of Australia that I grew up in, and I'd really like to see as the kind of Australia that we live in the future. Even if you're a shy person, I really encourage everyone to go out and just say hello. So I believe I came from a really privileged background, not from a financial point of view, although mum and dad were successful, but from this point of view of kindness, empathy, and compassion. My French flute teachers had their own version of the song lines, conveying joy and wonder at being alive on this beautiful planet through their music, a sense of keeping the great life force alive through sound and song. And the way I play the flute is thanks to them. They taught me how to metaphorically embrace and include all people in all my concerts. I know I'm happiest when I'm being the best I can be when I'm playing my flute, and I'm also happiest. Think about it. What makes you really happy? What makes me happy is helping other people and making a difference. So if you're feeling down, take on a trouble, a problem that's worthy of you in your life. Take on helping someone else, even in a small way. We're all on the same journey. Despite all of us coming from different places, there's always something that unites us. Being Australian and our love of this country that we call home. The 11 ships that arrived in Australia in the first flute had 40 different nationalities. And those ships arrived in an incredible land filled with hundreds of brilliant, different First Nations. So Australia has always been multicultural, and with this multicultural brilliance, if we look to the future with increasing tolerance, kindness and respect, I believe that Australia can be a treasure vase for the world, that we can pave the way for this troubled world. We can all help each other with our kindness, tolerance and understanding. A special thing about today is that we're free to celebrate Australia and being Australian in all sorts of ways, from barbecues to listening to music, to watching local sport, multicultural parades, or just enjoying some downtime. Today's a day when we acknowledge the immense cultural legacy of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. As I said earlier, our nation's story begins with their history and continues in the present and the future. I'd also like us to take time to acknowledge the volunteers across Australia, the unsung heroes who just put in and do their bit to keep our country the fantastic place that it is. I'd like to particularly acknowledge our fabulous farmers. I often say to the top end of town businessmen and politicians when I have a chance to meet them, listen, you can't eat the internet. We need to support our farmers. We need to really treat them as heroes. No matter how different our lifestyles are, I hope today will fill us all with a sense of belonging and an affection for this great country. In closing, and looking forward to the future, I'd like to welcome our brand new citizens. It's just fantastic that you're Australians now. Congratulations. I'd also like to express my heartfelt desire that every Australian child receives a fantastic education which includes music. Music, like sport, encourages leadership in others. Music, like sport, you have to be a leader and a follower. It teaches you community, it teaches you spirituality, emotionality and expression. I'd love every Australian child to be instilled with a spiritual connection to the land, to have a sense of place and true respect for elders past and present. I'd love them to have an education that helps them stay connected in all sorts of ways, not just on the internet. And we as elders can encourage this by showing them the beautiful things that are available in nature and outside the internet. I think we have to continue the quest for an integration and an equality which has never been previously known. It's still, in spite of the troubles of the world, it's a miracle to walk on the face of the earth, and even more of a miracle to be born in and live in, or to be a citizen of this truly astounding, beautiful country of ours, which is Australia. I'd love to thank the Nambucca Shire Council for inviting me here. I'd love to share the joy of today with you. Happy Australia Day, everyone, and I'd love to just play you a little song that Peter Allen wrote. I'm going to play it for you on the piccolo. This is, I think, poignant and correct for today, and with my brilliant sound engineer, Barry. Just wait till I pick up my piccolo, hang on.